Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Bream Fishing Project. And this is the first of the angler profiles. I've not done one of these over here on the Bream Fishing Project. And I got to tell you, this one's a cracker. I've recorded it quite a few months back. And anyway, it's time to release it. So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to roll the intros and I'm going to let the interview play out. I hope you enjoy it. It's a great story. There's a whole lot of learning to be had in this one, including all the way up to the end, where he tells a great story about catching a big bream, which is one thing you've got to love. All right, let's roll the intros and get straight into it. Here we go.
Welcome to the Bream Fishing Project. This is where you need to be every Tuesday to find out all the latest tips and tricks to help you target bream on lures. You'll get to hear from some of Australia's elite bream competition anglers and see how they were able to achieve their results in competitions around the country. Now, here is your host, the 2019 Hobie Kayak Fishing World Champion, Andrew Deeth.
So just before I mention who it is, I'm going to give you an idea of some of the things that he's won. And I can't list all of them, but he was the 2015 ABT champion. He has won 4 AFCs, and he's also won a Berkeley Team Series Grand Final, Team of the Year twice, and 4 qualifying rounds with his mate Mark. I'm speaking of none other than Liam Carruthers, mate. I want to welcome you to the show.
Thanks, Stevie. Appreciate it.
Did I miss much?
Nah. Yeah, that's pretty cool. I haven't had anyone list them off before, so it's awesome.
Oh, like I said, I didn't get to all of them. There was some Southern Brim rounds and a few bits and pieces as well.
Yeah.
So, yeah, great career. And especially as we get into your story, relatively not, I would say not a long time. So, since you've been lure fishing.
Yeah, pretty short, but pretty dedicated in that short time. Spent a fair bit of time on the water.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Well, I was going to say, like, it's a decent amount of time, but not compared to a lot of people.
Yeah,
So,
for sure.
So, mate, your lure fishing story starts a little bit unusually. So, do you want to tell us about how you got into lure fishing to begin with?
Yeah, mate. I didn't really know much about lure fishing at all when I first moved to Nowra with work, and went into the local tackle store as you do when you move to a new area. Met a bloke called Simon Pender who he has his own list of credentials himself, which I'm sure people who know Simon know what I'm talking about. He was nice enough to point me in the direction of his lure section, told me about the iconic Eco Gear 439 VX45, and told me about St Georges Basin, which I had no idea about. And I was just a young bloke in there trying to buy some pilchards for my gang hooks. But that day sort of changed me very quick when he offered me a session in his boat to go through these lures that I just purchased, and yeah, the rest is sort of history from there. It became a very long-winded, expensive addiction, but I'd never change it for a second.
Mate, tell us about that first fish that you caught on a lure.
Yeah, so went out in Simon's boat. He had and back then it was a super flash top ender. I remember seeing his boat and just being taken away by it. I bought off my neighbour in Greenwell Point a Webster twin fisher that was held together by rust, no electrics, no electric motor. So to see his top ender all decked out and wrapped up, pick him out from the wharf, I thought, oh yeah, it's a bit of fishing royalty. And we went out to one of his sort of drifts, and I think it was about second cast in. The blade went clunk after he showed me a few techniques, and it was. I still remember to this day. It was such an awesome looking fish, big 36 forker, yellowfin brim, which I think it was probably my first yellowfin brim growing up in South Australia. I'd caught a few black brim on bait, but yeah, I'd never caught one of them. And even Simon was looking at it going, it's a pretty good fish for in here, and I just remember that feeling going, oh, this has got me big time, sort of thing. And then he started telling me about tournaments, and then like that definitely sparked something in me. Like you could do this in a competitive nature against people, but and against yourself. I was like, oh, tell me more about this tournament stuff.
Yeah, right. So then, and we didn't talk about this before. So what did you do? What did you do then? Like how addicted were you?
I was super addicted, like especially to the fact that when he mentioned about tournaments, I went home, I looked up what you needed, sort of thing, in a tournament, live well in your boat, those sort of things, an electric motor. So I'm using his electric motor, so saving money up for a month or two. Misso helped me out there, which was good. Sold the old rust bucket and went down and bought myself a Hornet trophy.
Nice.
Built a live well into it myself, got it all plumbed out, got it decked out with the aim of, I think it probably would have been like mid-year that year, with the aim of fishing my first ever comp that next January, which was the Berkeley Evinrude Team Series back then, and that was the Hawkesbury
Yeah.
round.
Right. We spoke earlier, or I said that you won some comps with Mark Healy. So how'd you end up meeting up with Mark? Did you know him or?
So no, meeting Mark didn't happen until very late in the piece, probably I think it was about 2020,
Oh,
2019,
okay.
20. Yeah, we sort of bumped past on the tournament scene a bit when I hit my straps, and it was more we were bumping into each other in comps as competitors fishing the same areas at the same time based on the tide. And I think after the fourth or fifth time we bumped into each other, it sort of clicked that we were fairly like-minded. And I knew he was on the Cranka team, so I knew we were using similar lures, and that sort of gelled a bit of a conversation starter and a friendship that's definitely flourished since then. We're both very similar natured on the water, think very alike, and definitely when we teamed up, there was a bit of proof in the pudding on two blokes who think alike. Definitely can score some runs on the board in these tournaments.
Absolutely. Well, then let's wind back the clock and just give us a bit of an idea of how your first competition was.
Yeah, so in the lead up to that competition, obviously, I had a huge learning curve, and I didn't let any sort of time waste. I was dedicating every spare minute I had to go down and fish the basin after work. What that led to, though, was me to become very stovepiped in a system that was very healthy. Had a lot of bream in it back then. Fishing, I'll never say was easy, but it was relatively easy back then to catch five bream in the deep on blades and maybe some plastic sort of thing. But what it didn't expose me to was structure, as in vertical structure, rocks, and it didn't expose me to tidal flow, which became two of my nemesis. So leading into that first tournament, which was the Berkeley Evinrude Team Series on the Hawkesbury River,
Yep.
I was exposed to a system that had a heap of tide, a heap of structure, and I remember fishing it with a very old mate of mine back then, and we caught two bream.
Oh,
It was like a win for us though, mate, because we were so feared of the donut because
ah,
we had no
ah,
idea. Just catching two, we were stoked. The goal was not the donut. So yeah, we're pretty happy from them, and what that led into pretty much from 2009, 10, and 11 was 3 years of pretty much non-existent results, mate. Like I was just making the numbers up. I was going out there, and the goal was not to donut, explore the
yeah.
systems, because that's what's so good about tournament fishing. It forces you to explore systems. But
Mm.
I just remember being as big of a sponge as I could be, going to the weigh-ins and going to the pre-fishes and talking to the blokes that I refer to as the OGs. You got your Simon Penders, you got your Wal Balzans, you got your Steve Gills back then, Nick Ray, Tom Deers, like these guys, and you could never not mention Kaimi, like the information flow that came out of
Mm.
these guys at the weigh-in, where they would just absolutely divulge everything and tell you exactly what they did, was unreal. But just trying to process it all as a young bloke with very limited exposure on the water, I didn't know half the things they were talking about, so I was trying to wrap it around my head.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, a huge learning curve over those years, but definitely paid my dues, I feel, in the tournaments until I started to then work out exactly what they were talking about, with the time on the water proving beneficial, and then start the pattern and everything and work out where you needed to be at what time.
Yeah, yeah. It is interesting. Like you do see a lot of people come and do exactly that, and they'll fish for a period of time without a lot of results. But then at some point, it all clicks,
You got to find
and
your
they
strengths.
just
Yeah.
yeah, they have a great year, and you go, oh my goodness, where'd they come from? Also, I think as we go through your story, it also evolves in as much as you move in and out of different lures and different techniques. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see.
Yeah, 100%.
All right. So tell us a little bit more about you. I know you spent a bit of time overseas. Was that beneficial to catch and brim? Did that help you at all?
I think helped me become a lot more diverse. So as we were discussing earlier, I was very stovepiped and I was very singular in my approach. I was like, my strength was throwing vibes in 21 to 28 foot of water and maybe a gulp shrimp if I was lucky. I was no good at shallow water fishing. I hated
Yeah.
fishing the flats. So then to be launched into the tournaments, what I'd do was I'd try and fish moored boats in 25 foot of water on blades, or I'd try and find drop offs in the deep water or channels. And when you fish in places like the Hawkesbury, Sydney Harbour, Bateman's Bay, it just doesn't work. That was a huge learning curve for me when it comes to structure fishing. And I remember
Yeah.
in 2012, just before I left to go over to the States, I was fishing a Southern Bream Series event down at Bateman's Bay. And I was fishing with Paul Wilson back then. He went on a holiday to Thailand, so I fished solo that round.
Okay.
And I remember I had a big game plan in my head. I was going to go out to the what's known as the reef near the bridge there in the middle, and I was going to bait it the whole time. I was going to get my 5 fish. And then I went out to pre-fish and had a bit of a pre-fish and I couldn't catch anything. It wasn't working. I remember sitting, and back then the start was at Elgin. You'd sit around the
Oh,
campfire with everyone, have a chat. I remember talking to Troy Parsons, Brad Williams, and all that, and they were talking about getting fish in the oyster racks and stuff, and using like sort of light-weighted plastics. And my mindset was lightweight DT was 112, and they're like, no,
okay.
no, 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 mate. This is a lightweight, and they showed me a hidden weight jig head for the first time. And I was like, what's that weight? And they're like 132nd. I was like, 130. All right, how's that work? And I remember Paso was nice enough to hand me a couple. And I was like, right, cool. And I just remember starting by myself in the tinny, launching at the start. And I was like, right, I got a fistful of these lightweight jig heads. I've got gulp shrimp. I'm going to find a set of racks that no one pulls into, and I'm just going to try it. And I remember one of the slowest boats in the field. Everyone went past me. Everyone went to all their spots, and there was a set of racks near the bridge that was completely clear. I remember pulling into it. Tide was raging, and I was like, God, how are you going to do this? I hated tide. I hated structure. I hated it all. Somehow I set my boat up, and I was bouncing between the poles. I'm sure the oyster farmers would have loved me that day. But I remember
Yep.
in my first run down, I had 2 fish in the well and got roasted by 2 fish. And that alone in that half an hour would have been the best result I've ever had on bait. Like I hated the
Yeah.
jig.
Right.
But from there I was like, right, I just got on the outboard, went up and went down the second run. And then once I went down the second run, I'd filled my bag. And as you know,
Wow.
DP, Bateman's Bay, like the Clyde River is a notoriously hard system. If
Yeah.
you've got 5 fish, you're a chance. Like you're a top 10 at worst, and you're a chance of winning. I just remember that first hour I had 5 fish, now good fish. And I just stayed in that area and I kept working. I lost a lot of fish that day, but then as the tide dropped and the wind come up, there was a flat that sort of exposed itself. And again, sitting around that campfire, I remember talking to people like Walbowser and Walls, like anytime the wind blows on a flat, mate, get those surface lures out and throw them out there. And I remember in the last hour throwing this surface lure on this flat behind the exposed racks and got 2 upgrades. And yeah, I was lucky enough to steam on in my tinny solo, very green, and I walked up to the scales and dropped that bag of fish on the scales and watched the scales go up, and everyone was just clapping and beyond themselves, and Wall and Gilly and everyone come and gave me a big high five. And I was like, if there was ever a point where I was questioning or I wasn't addicted, I was addicted from then on in. I was sort of a little bit um, I was a little bit disappointed in a way where I knew I was going to the States later on that year because I felt like I started to find some form because
Yeah.
that win, along with fishing the Gamakatsu team series back then with Paul, which had a few southern rounds, it had a southern division involved. Me
Yeah.
and Paul ended up taking out the team of the year for the southern series that year too because
Yeah.
we found a bit of form. So I finally felt like I was finding my straps a bit, but then I went over to the States for 2 years. What that
Yeah.
did for me though was I went to a complete unknown. I went over there, bought a new bass boat because the GFC hit, and all of a sudden, what I sold my tinny for, I could afford a bass boat. Thought I won the lottery. I thought, oh, I'm going to buy this big glass boat that all the guys fish in Australia, and it's going to make me a better fisherman. I learned very quickly it didn't make me a better fisherman, but I looked a lot cooler at what I did.
That's it. You go places faster.
100%. I entered a few bass tournaments over in the States, and again, it was just a steep learning curve, but it was awesome because, as I was saying before, it forced my diversity. All of a sudden, I had to throw lures that I'd never thrown before, different techniques. And what it did was it sort of erased my previous habits. So when I came
Mm.
back to Australia, what I found was I wasn't locked in, or I wasn't committed to using the blade anymore, using the plastics anymore. What I felt I was very good at was just sitting back and taking in information from the system. That,
Yeah.
and I missed the cranker crab phase when I was in the States. So everyone's
Okay.
talking about these cranker crabs when I was in the States. Everyone's sending me photos, and I'm like, all right, I can't wait to try one of these things. And then, yeah, the rest is history. Once I tried one,
Yeah.
they worked.
Yeah. What we might do, that gives us a really good rundown of kind of where you've come from. And only in the first part of your sort of tournament fishing career. One of the things I liked about what you said is you fish for a while, you kind of paid your dues, but I know from similar feelings, once you get that first win or result that really gets you, it does go another level. Like your competitive spirit goes, I can do this now.
Yeah, you believe in
Um,
yourself, mate. That's a huge like confidence in any sport, golf, tennis, fishing. Like you've just got to have confidence, and to get that confidence, you've got to get a win under your belt.
yeah, that's it. And like you said, your mates came around and all congratulate. Everyone's happy for you,
Yeah,
which is just a great feeling.
it
So.
is.
So yeah, but mate, what we're going to do is we're going to dial into a few lures and techniques. So in sort of Australian lure fishing podcast style, I'm going to ask you to pick 3 lures, and we're going to dial in how you go about using them. So rather than our normal format where we might dial in a certain system, I'm actually going to ask you to sort of isolate some structure. So to start with, which lure would you like to start first with? Has he got something in mind?
I can't. I could never not say the cranker crab, mate. It's literally created who I am. So in the
Okay.
fishing industry.
All right, all right. Well, let's talk about the cranker crab, and tell us a bit about how you learnt to use it, and maybe how that evolved, and what sort of ways you like to fish it now.
Yeah, like I said, mate, when I missed the whole introduction of the lure when I was overseas, there was a lot of people who were pretty keen to show me once I landed back in Australia. So I remember coming straight back and fishing with Paul Wilson again as I got back, and we were on the Clyde again. So the Clyde's definitely something that sort of paved my way, and it was a system that absolutely destroyed me back in the day. And donut after donut, I think I fell out of my boat in a tournament in there once too. So like,
Yeah,
it proper
right.
destroyed me, but it paid me back. So I was fishing a Southern Brim round with Paul, and we really had nothing, and the tide was turning. I think from memory, in the last probably hour and a half, so it would have been about 12:30. We had like 3 small fish or something. I didn't even have any of the cranker crabs, but Paul had a few, and we went up to the Clyde River Bridge as the tide
Yep.
turned, and Paul said, "Hey, throw one of these things on." I said, "Oh, what is it?" He showed me. It's a cranker crab, and I was like, "Geez, yeah, I've been pretty keen to have a look at one of these." And he's like, "Yeah, well, don't lose it. They're bloody expensive," sort of thing. And I was like, "Oh, I was a bit nervous casting it in." I still remember casting it in on that bridge pylon, just in the back eddy, as the tide started to run in. And as soon as that crab disappeared, I clicked my bail up over, and I just remember like as soon as the tension come on the line, that absolute electric machine gun bite of a brim, grabbing it and shaking its head. And I was like, oh, wound into it and caught a fish. And I was like, oh, that was pretty good. And we proceeded to do that about 6 or 7 more times in the next 40 minutes, and we won the tournament. And
Wow.
from that moment on, I was right. As soon as I got home, I was googling everything about Cranka Crabs. It was like, who's the brand Cranka? Who owns it? I at Steve Steer, and I wrote him a message straight away when I won that tournament. And I just wanted to let him know. I wasn't even seeking anything from him. I just wanted to let him know that who I was, first time using his product, and that was a result that happened. And he is an absolute true gentleman in the fishing industry. And he took the time to come back to me, and he thanked me for messaging him, but he also absolutely divulged a heap of knowledge to me. Instead of just coming back and clean, yep, thanks, mate, cheers.
Yeah.
He not only he came back and he goes, yeah, mate, awesome. Try this application. Try this application. They're a really good lure. Try this. I was like, oh, that's unreal.
Wow.
I remember buying a heap from the tackle store the next week, and then I was using them in the applications that Steve told me. And I remember writing back to him, and a friendship started to blossom from there. And he was like, "Yeah, try this, try that." And then fast forward when I was lucky enough to win the ABT grand final in 2015, it was using his product, and from that day, and he was one of the first to call me straight up. He congratulated me, and then he invited me to join the Cranka team from there on in, which was something pretty special for me.
Absolutely. The Cranka team is a great team. They've got some sensational anglers, and I hear rumors about the chat groups that you got going on, and I'm a bit jealous. So well done on that. Um, a couple of things with Steve Steer is when I first started podcasting, I did the Big Brim series on the Australian Lure Fishing podcast, which the Team Doc Lures people can get access to, and did an interview with him, not knowing him at all, never spoken to him, and he gave one of the best interviews I've ever done. So it's still up for people to listen to.
He's got to be one
Um,
of the most knowledgeable, in tune, and in depth individuals with regards to chasing bream on lures that I've ever had the privilege to meet. Like, and he thoroughly enjoys it. Like, to see the passion in the bloke's face, and I was super like, and this is one of my fondest memories that I'll take my whole life. I was super fortunate to spend a day on the Derwent, or 2 days on the Derwent with him before my first ever trip to Tasmania, and the things I learnt that a human is capable of using a cranker crab to
yeah,
extract the brim will just serve me well for years to come. Like, it was just an absolute privilege, but an amazing learning curve to watch a individual with his own lure that he created just go about his business. So yeah, it was pretty cool to take it all in.
that is awesome. All right, so let's move on. So you won your first comp on the back of a bridge pylon. How did you go about perfecting new techniques, and what sort of techniques to use for your cranker crabs today?
So yeah, bridge pylons was the first one with the Cranka Crabs, and then from there on in, I wanted to work out where I could throw these things and how I could go about it. I reckon the next sort of test for that was again a Southern Brim round, and I reckon it was when we were fishing Greenwell Point in the grand final. We used to fish Greenwell Point and St Georges Basin. I remember, I don't think we did too well in the basin, but we jumped about 9 spots to finish in the top 5 in the first grand final for the Southern Brim, fishing Greenwell Point. And this was a deep rock structure and a shallow rock structure. So what we pretty much isolated it to was myself and Paul. We wanted to fish the deep rocks near the punt, up near
Oh,
Comoros
up in
Island,
near now. Yeah.
up near Comoros Island, where the tide really rushes there. But we also had the shallow reef to the west of the bridge. As you drive over the narrow bridge and you look west, you've got that in town, you've got that shallow reef. So what we did
Yeah.
was
Okay.
we ran between there on the tide changes. And what I found that day was like the snag resistance of the lure. And a lot of people are going to spit their coffee out when I say that, because a lot of people do lose the lure. And again, I've already explained that in your previous podcast. Is it's just a
Mm.
technique thing. The actual lures are very snag resistant if you don't drive the hooks into a rock. So what I learned on that sort of session was the faster the water, the better it is, because you don't do anything. All the natural elements impart the action on the lure, and the brim absolutely smash it. So what it became was just cast up current, let it come back towards you, and hope the brim grabbed it before it got caught on a rock. If it got caught on a rock, just lift your rod, electric over, get on top of it, and lift it out of the crack, and then keep doing that. And that proved super successful. And I think with the recipe of that and the bridge application, that's where I started to really find my straps, and I become really confident on waterways like Sydney and the Hawkesbury, where I could look at Google Maps in the lead up to an event and just expose where I can fish this lure. Because traditionally I could never fish a blade there. I wasn't a real good crankbaiter, and plastics didn't really do much for me. So I was again, it stovepiped me into a singular
Mm.
lure, but this singular lure had so much versatility to it. It sort of made me become a lot better angler all round, given where I could throw the lure.
So with those reefs or similar reefs, you're basically casting up current, letting the tide bring that lure back to you. Now, as the tide gets to crazy fast, are you letting the boat slip backwards? So you're going backwards on the current a little bit?
Yeah, 100%, mate. And that was, again, we're going to chop and change a bit here, but When I won the grand final on the Clarence, I'd never been in the Clarence River before, and that is a
Mhm.
notoriously heavily tidal system. And I fished a well-known area called Browns Rocks, and I knew that from watching the AFC DVDs. I went there; I'd never been there before. I pre-fish. I caught some really good fish between the two breakers up the front. I raced out there on day one, and within an hour on day one, it was evident that those fish had moved on, and my only other backup plan was to go to Browns Rocks. I remember driving up to Browns Rocks and seeing the current wrapping around the corner and about 12 boats all coming down the current and sort of cartwheeling down the current along the reef line. And I was like, okay, how are we going to do this? So I just wanted to try something different, create some fishing room. But what I did was I worked against the current. So I pulled my boat in, worked against the current right on the eddy line where you could see the water eddying. So obviously the water was coming from deep, hitting those rocks, pressure eddying up, and you could see the swells in the water. I'd sit my
Mhm.
boat and nose it in on that current line on the old, I tested the old electric batteries. I think I blew an electric battery on day three doing this before we had the
Yeah, right.
brushless systems. But I would go against the current and people would come down with the current, but they'd have the etiquette to go around me because obviously you don't want to come in on someone they know if you're not drifting down, you've got right away. So people would give me heaps of space and I'd cast that lure as far up current as I could and bring it
Yep.
down. And as soon as I felt it working on those rocks, I was just, my GPS was like a Mr. Squiggle drawing. Like I coloured in every rock I could, but I could feel that crab work in every rock, every crack, and I knew exactly where I was going to get a bite during that tournament. And that's what I was doing.
Wow.
I was motoring against it, but when the tide became too much, I would hold against it, fish a section, and then come off the electric, come down 10 meters, hold against it, cast up, fish, come down, and just for my one drift, people were doing five drifts, getting back on the outboard and going up, getting back on the outboard. For me, it was just covering as much ground and
Yeah.
keeping my lure in the water as long as I could.
Okay, that's interesting. Okay, so a couple of questions I have on that technique. Um, so you throw the line out, the lure out. Yeah, I assume you've got to leave it on a semi slack line, like it can't be too tight. I'd imagine. You rod tip up or rod tip down.
Rod tips up, and what I found was as the current got heavier, I'd work it on a 45, and I'd have to like, if you know what I mean, I'd have to. It is like it's like jigging, vertical jigging in heavy current. You'd have to bring your boat back with your lure till your lure got down to the bottom. Then you'd step on the electric again, and you'd work probably three or four boulders. That's all you had time for. But yeah,
Yeah,
rod tip was always up, and all it was just watching your crab tick along the rock, tick, 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 and then you'd feel the grrr, and you just knew you had a fish, and you'd wind it on, and the bite was super aggressive.
and I'm not sure what you were using then, but what's your rod of choice at the moment?
It's definitely the rim buster, so the brawler, sorry, in
The
the
brawler.
Miller Rods brawler, yeah.
Yeah,
So
yeah. Okay.
it's a bit short, so like a lot of people would argue casting distance, but like I can send it, so I'll send that thing pretty hard. But yeah, that thing has just given me that extra leverage, and I've definitely lost a lot of fish in my tournament times coming up to the last few years, and it wasn't till the last few years where I found the rod, the reel, the drag setting, the leader combination where I started extracting a lot of those fish that I used to lose, which the results sort of helped.
Yeah, and that's interesting because I think in talking to a bunch of anglers, I guess I'm seeing a lot longer, more flexible rods, or slower tapers or whatever.
I've lost so many fish, I feel, in the past just to the arc of my rod. Like, it just, I'm fishing in white knuckle territory, and those
Yeah,
brawlers, I'm skipping in underneath ferry docks and hitting the last pontoon. And the moment I feel a rattle or I see that line tick, I'm on the electric, I'm winding, and I'm giving them hell to get
yeah, right.
out.
So you're belting them.
Yeah.
All right. And look for the deep water techniques. What sort of lines and leaders are you running at the moment?
So I've always used a 10 pound braid. And the leader that definitely helped was the Sunline V
One we're
Hard.
talking
Yeah,
about.
100%. The V Hard is exactly what I've been using in the last sort of 2 or 3 years, and Mark put me onto that. So Mark was the
Yeah.
one who showed me that, and yeah, the that abrasion coating, like I've had a lot of times. I've landed fish, got them in the net, and they're proper proper donkey fish, and that line is absolutely frayed, and I touch it and it just separates.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I like the V hard as well. All right. So apart from your deep water high current, where else are we fishing the crabs?
Um, so yeah, bridge pylons, deep water, high current, shallow. So like on rockles, casting them up on a high tide, casting them right up and just pulling them over. Oyster clusters, very dangerous, very low percentage, like Cowan Creek, crystal clear water. A lot of the times, once trying to work out in a pre-fish what the fish are doing, I'll see fish up cruising, and they look like blue groper. They're that big up Cowan, so you'll pitch a crab in front of them and just see if they're going to eat it. And they will eat it. 9 times out of 10, they'll eat it. And then the problem is once they eat it, getting them out of that oyster clustered rock. And they don't do you straight
Yeah.
away. They tease you, mate. They go for about 30 meters before they do you. Because they
Oh,
come
yeah.
back
30
better.
meters sideways.
100%. Other techniques, I've tried potholing them a bit in St Georges Basin. Never works. But what did happen last year, no, the year before at Gippsland Lake, I worked out a bit of a potholing technique. I remember Steersy talking about a potholing technique, and what I mean by that is either finding blacks mudding and pulling the crab into their mud, or
Hmm.
finding on weed flats, finding just brackets of cleared weed where there's a sand patch and put your crab in that. I was fortunate enough to take out big brim in 2022 at Gippsland Lake, and I'm spewing it wasn't a weigh-in event; it was a length event, and
Yeah.
this fish was huge. What I did was I cast out, pulled the crab into the pothole, and in the clearing of the weed there was a sand patch, but there was also a mud patch, and all I could see was just a soot. So I knew there was a fish
Yeah.
there. Remember pulling it in, got the crab in there, just gave it a bit of a jiggle, and it just went absolutely clunk. This thing just screamed across this flat. I pulled it in, and in the upper vents, they give you a yellow ruler. So the yellow ruler is the standard 40 centimeters. So you can have a fish 40 to the fork, use a yellow ruler. They give you a folded in half orange ruler. And that thing
Yeah.
goes up to 80 centimeters. And I had to get the orange ruler out for this bad boy. And it went 48, I believe, to the fork. It was a
Oh,
huge fish, and I got 1.99 kilos on the app for it. I'll tell you what, mate, it
oh,
was well into the 2 kilos every day. This fish, it was the biggest brim I've ever seen. The girth on it was phenomenal. Yeah,
wow.
pretty special fish that one, and that was purely just a last ditch effort in the last 20 minutes of the comp. Remember just seeing everything set up and had Steersy's voice in my head going, oh, just give it a pothole. I just remember casting
Yeah.
out going, this would be a pretty funny story if it plays off. And yeah, that thing was an absolute weapon of a fish. And I didn't even have a non-voter to take a photo of it for me because I was running a
Oh,
spare that day. So,
yeah. Yeah.
yeah, I got a couple of like
Um,
failed attempt selfies and a couple of photos of it on the ruler.
yeah, mate, great fish. And when you were talking me through that, I had memories of Richard Summerton down at St George's Basin
He did it,
winning comp
yeah. Yep.
doing the same
I
thing.
remember hearing Samo doing that on one tree flat. I remember it very
Yeah,
dearly because I was like, man, good on him. I've been trying to do that in socially for a long time, and I couldn't get him to work.
yeah, and he dominated one year in particular. So
That's unreal. That's good.
yeah,
Yeah, they're pretty versatile like that, and it makes sense. That's what they're up there digging for. Like they're in there trying to find yabbies and crabs and stuff. So if you can work something like that, it's always going to happen.
yeah, yeah,
One more technique,
yeah,
and this
absolutely.
this is just purely for enjoyment, and it definitely pays well in tournaments. But I love throwing. And a lot of people say, "Why don't you throw the light crab?" I don't have the patience for a light crab. Everything I do is a heavy crab. It's how I
Okay.
am. I'm 1,000 miles an hour, so like and when
Yep.
I'm on the water, you'll see that I cast. Yep, nothing's here. I'm on the motor go and I spot hop, but I love throwing straight fluorocarbon 3 pound on moored boats, heavy crab in summer.
Really.
So much fun, especially in Sydney Harbour, especially when the Oz Open used to be in March. It was such a deadly technique, and the fish would absolutely crush that crab. And I would tailor it because I know the fall rate is pretty quick, so I'd fish boats 10 foot or less. But yeah, the Hawkesbury or the Harbour, and the Hawkesbury qualified this year. Like I think I came third, and that was all in pit water, doing the same thing. Just And that was in the cooler months, but finding those boats that were in like 10 foot or less, having a good distance off them, you can't see the fish on them, but just casting in, really tight cast on the boat hole, letting it sink. And then if they haven't eaten it on the drop, soon as you lift it and puff that sand up, they absolutely nail it. And then the fluorocarbon, you just hold on and hope because it's so much fun.
Hope you can get it.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
that's
wow.
definitely one of my favourite techniques when it's working. It's a bit stressful in tournament fishing because you just want to get them in the
Yeah.
net, and the fluoro just takes a long time. But yeah,
Yeah.
that's a fun technique.
Yeah. Now, and look, with all the crap that we've spoken about today, I assume we're talking to the small, heavy crabs. Have you experimented much with the larger ones?
Yeah, so the larger ones I caught a lot of good fish in winter on. So and when I was using them was in the middle passage of Hawkesbury. So I'll break the Hawkesbury down into upper, middle, and lower passages. So lower passage is Brooklyn Bridge all the way to Pittwater. Middle
Mhm.
passage is Railway Bridge, Brooklyn Bridge up to Spencer, and then the higher passage is Spencer up. Pretty much from the Railway Bridge all the way up to the Vines and near the Spencer turnoff. All those rock walls, all those bridges, I used to use a 65 mil religiously.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think you and I spoke about, I think it was either you or Mark, I can't remember, spoke about being up around that Spencer area and just bouncing crabs over the deep boulders that are, off the shore
Yeah.
in really, really high current.
Yeah, and the reason I was using the bigger crabs is not because their sink rate's any different. It's not because the bite's any different. It's the ability to go harder on them with those heavy set hooks.
Okay.
I would gear up, I would lock the drag up, and I felt like I'd either straighten hooks or pull hooks on the smaller crab. I'd I'd absolutely, yeah, I'd go pretty hard on them on the big crab, and it would get them away from those rocks because, like what Mark said, and it's a technique we've done together, is because those rocks are so deep, you don't know whereabouts you are with regards to where your crab is on that rock. It could be on the far side of the rock. So if that brim gets too much tension on you or gets a little bit on you, they're gonna cut you off because you're casting up
Yeah.
current. So it's just to get them away from the rock, get them away from the crack as fast as you can. You're only getting them a foot away, and then the current and the boat's doing the rest. You're just on the
Yeah.
electric going with the current and towing it
Towing it out.
out.
Ah, very cool. Very cool. All right, mate, we're going to cut all your crabs off your line.
Yeah.
Mate, you got to pick another lure, mate. What's number two?
Number two, something that I definitely like using in the last few years, and that's the Daiwa MR Spike. And I found using them on bridge pylons, complementing the crabs was a really good technique, and it helped me get those fish that were a bit higher in the water column because of my reluctancy and purely my stubbornness not to use a lighter crab.
Yeah. Okay. So you're targeting the fish that are higher in the column. I take it it's an up current cast and then bring it back as tight as you can to the pontoon to the bridge pylon.
Yeah, 100%. And it's like in the heart of the tide. So when the tide's roaring, I'm literally hiding in the eddies behind the pylon where, as you know, if you get your nose out literally 2 inches, you're cartwheeling down the river. So you're just staying in there. You just poke yourself out enough to get that cast up as far as you can. You hope the weather's playing nicely and you got the wind up your chuffer because it's really hard if it's on your nose. You're casting it as tight as you can in the pylon, and you just feel that lure cranking against the pylon and tapping it and tapping it. And usually, where you get your bite is as your lure comes near your rod tip in the lee way of the current eddy. They're sitting just on the back of the pylon, like you, trying to get out of the current and not
Yeah.
work as hard.
Yeah. That's interesting. And the the spike mid runner, like why not an EXDR or why the spike? Like
I,
what have you found?
I don't know. I just liked it, mate. Like it's just I threw it a couple of times and it felt good in the water. It ran at a good depth for me on the pylon. It was easy to cast and it didn't. I found like I used to try and use deep chubbies and they'd cartwheel a bit because of that deep dib. So I think that's what probably put me off the EXDR just because I didn't want the lure to cartwheel as much. So the MR used to just rock it out, similar to like a double clutch, like it just punch and it'd keep going and get in nice and tight.
Yeah, right. Right. And a couple of things with those. So what color's in your box?
I love the matte prawn because of the UV on it. It's got a really good, like yeah, it's unreal. Like and because usually when I am fishing it in that middle passage on those Brooklyn sort of bridges, and that the water's very milky or dirty or brown because it's in winter. The Hawkesbury qualifiers usually in sort of April, May. You've got a lot of run, a lot of water, a lot of dirty water. The brown suji is pretty good too.
Okay.
So a suji one, and the there's a green one, green prawn, or it's like a green prawn color, so it's similar to the matte prawn, same pattern, but it's just got green stripes on it, and it's a bit clearer with a brown body, brown bottom.
Yeah, yeah, very cool. And for your bridge pylons, what's your sort of setup of choice?
Same thing, mate. I'm throwing them on a brawler with a Soul 2500, exact same setup as a crab. I've got so when I'm fishing Bream tournaments, I've got I think 6 or 7 brawlers with 2500 souls, all exactly the same, and I'll use them for crabs. I'll use them for crankbaits. I'll use them for topwater. I'll use them all the same. The only time it changes is when I'm using the fluorocarbon for the crabs on the boat. So I'll use them on a Blade Freak, which is like a 7 foot 6 rod, a 1000 Luvi spooled up with a 3 pound fluorocarbon, which is the Daiwa fluorocarbon.
That's interesting. I'm surprised that you're using the brawler for all those applications, but obviously you're ripping some heads off.
Yeah, yeah. I did start to use the Twitch Freak for a bit just to
Mhm.
stop pulling as many hooks because the hooks were like especially on the spikes, like they're really good finesse hooks and they're those real fragile ones and they're brittle. So what I did find I was going a bit too hard on them, I would pull hooks or I'd break hooks. So I went to the Twitch Freak sort of in the later comps, and that helped stick the hooks in a lot more. But I had to be a bit more wary because it didn't have as much backbone as a brawler. But
Yeah.
you don't need to pull too hard. Like, again, that's probably my stubbornness on the bridge pylons. As you know, you've only got to get them a foot away, and the current's going to do the rest of the work for you. But I just probably got a bit of trauma from losing so many fish, mate. I just
Yeah.
as soon as they grab a lure, I'm trying to reef them out.
I'm trying to get my lure back.
Yeah.
All right. And are you using them for any other applications apart from bridge pylons?
Yeah, so when I go down to Victoria, I'm bouncing them along banks. I'm using them on mud flats. I'm dredging the mud. So it's generally known when you go down to Victoria, you want to be kicking that mud up. And
Yeah.
it's not the standard application, but yeah, you throw on a 8 to 9 foot running lure in 5 foot of water just to dig as much mud up as you can, sort of thing, to draw the attention of the fish. But yeah, for me in a tournament, I'm not one unless I'm in Victoria. In New South Wales, I'm not going to run a crankbait on too many edges and stuff. I'll throw them on bridge pylons. I'll throw them on um, marinas. So some of the marinas you're allowed to fish in. I'll get like sort of parallel on the piano keys and just cast them as just like you would on a bridge pylon. Get as close as you
Yeah.
can because they do sit under that sort of kelp weed and stuff that grows on them too.
And last thing with the dial ones, are you changing the hooks out at all? So I know we spoke about them being a finesse hook. Are you swapping, like, if if you ruin them, are you putting something different back on?
Yeah, so generally what I'll do is like with all crankbaits, again, something Mark taught me is I'll change the back treble and the back treble gets changed to a decoy just because of how sticky they are. So and they're a bit stronger. So yeah, as soon as it comes out of the box, I'm putting a decoy size 12, I think it is, on the back, throwing them out.
Yeah.
And then as the day goes, if I've got the time, I'll change the treble over. If not, I'll just tie a whole new lure on or get it out of the box. It's already got the decoy on the back. I do that if I was using chubbies or any sort of crankbait. I'd always put a decoy on the back treble just because of how sticky they are and how strong they are.
Yeah. Yeah. And while you were talking, I did look up the Daiwa colors. I think the green one you're talking about is probably blue Suji
Yep,
prawn.
that's the one. Yep.
I think that covers the spike. All right. If we throw those away, what else are you going to tie on? What's the next thing in your box?
I think it'd have to be a top water of some type, and a lot of people go to the bent minnow. I do use them, and it's taken me a while to use them. I still don't think I've got the technique down pat. I can't get it to run or look like it should, but I don't really know what they should look like. It definitely looks like a dying bait fish. I can tell you right now,
Yeah, yeah.
it looks vulnerable. But I definitely used to like the way the Eco Gear PXs used to run, the little prawn one, and any sort of lure that I can get it to grip the surface and just get a real nice walk the dog action is
Okay.
what I used to like. I didn't really like the erratic ones too much. I used to like it in the long casts, as far as you can, and just something that was easy to work in the water. And just you really get that nice sort of walk the dog happening, so you could pause it, watch those bow waves and stuff. That's every time we go down to Victoria, that's what you've got tied on for Mallacoota. It's always a top water bite first up, which is fun. Like we don't usually get too many
Mm.
other top water applications. And then where are other arenas that I like to use the top water application are oyster racks. I love throwing across crazy 4 or 5 racks with real locked up drag. And what I'll do is I'll cast, and as soon as I see that bow wave, I'll work that lure as fast as I can to try and get it as close to the boat as I can before I pause it, and just pray it
Yeah.
hits it on the right side of the oyster rack. It's something I used to
Oh,
really love doing in the Clyde, something I like doing at Foster. Like it's a cool technique. It's by all means not, it's effective, but it just, yeah, you lose a lot of fish and a lot of gear doing it, but it's how you can get some big bites.
yeah, it'll get your heart going.
Yeah.
Um, if you're casting across 3 or 4 or 5 sets of racks, I assume you're probably not throwing the PX.
No,
Like
I
you have to,
I have thrown the PX, yeah, in the Clyde, in the like the glass out and stuff, and yeah, just reefing on them with those stinger hooks and just hoping they fly in their face and hold.
yeah.
Yeah. The PX definitely works. I haven't done it with Bants. It was a PX Skinny Pop Junior. I used to do it a bit
Oh
with.
yeah,
That was a good lure for it. And then even the old stiffy poppers, like just because I didn't mind
yeah,
losing them because they were cheap, you just
yeah,
get
yeah.
them across the racks, and yeah, that'd be pretty. I'd get whacked a few times.
Absolutely, they had there's something about those that the fish seem to like. And just so for anyone that doesn't know what these lures are, like a PX was an Eco Gear pencil popper with a round nose and stingers on the back. It was a really finesse bait. I think one of the more finesse ones in the whole lure range. And like you said, for glass outs was really good. I don't think they're available at all anymore.
Yeah, probably not. All the good ones aren't available anymore, mate.
Yeah, but the thing with those, they were a little bit harder to throw, and a lot of
Yeah,
guys didn't really get there with it, in my opinion.
yeah,
So, and as the lines in the last, so you've been fishing with Lewis since around, I think you said 2009, maybe pre-interview.
yep,
Um, and in that time, lines, rods, reels, everything's so much better in that sort of 15 years.
yeah,
There's been a lot change.
yeah. There has
So,
been. It's phenomenal how the tackles evolved.
yeah. Um, and then the skinny pop, because there's a few different ones here that you've mentioned. The skinny pop was a long, like a 70 mil stick bait with a really little cup face on the bottom, and it gave a great little prawn style pop when you popped it.
Yeah, I've never come across a lure that grips the surface as well as a skinny pop used to in all my time now. Like that was because of the casting distance you could get with it. It would go a long way, and then the moment you flick that rod tip, it was ready for action because it would grip the top of the water. It was something. It was a really cool design lure.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I remember using a lot for whiting as well. They seem to like it, so
Yeah.
I reckon that's a pretty good rundown. It's given people a few ideas, especially this time of year, leading into summer. You've got some surface to play around with. Um, the Spike MRs are obviously a great lure, and then for anyone that wants to really get into some big fish, yeah, the Cranka Crab's definitely one of the go-to lures, especially over the last. We're coming up on a decade now, I think. So,
Yeah.
and still catching.
Yeah. It's just yeah. It's all in the lure design, mate. Because the fish eat it. You don't have to do much with it. You just get it down there and hope it comes back with a fish on it.
Exactly. Well, I hope it comes back sometimes, but absolutely. Oh, mate, I reckon that's given people a great idea of particularly we spent a lot of time on the crab, which is good because although it's a great fish catching lure, I know there's still a few people that haven't worked it out. So definitely good to get those out there and have a play with it.
as,
Maybe get some 3 pound out under the boats.
as crazy as it sounds, and I know it's hard for people to take, but you just got to throw that thing in the most gnarliest looking area and where you don't want to throw it, and that's where it's going to get absolutely crunched.
Yeah, yeah. And one of the things that I don't think we touch hard on is if you are fishing high current, that a lot of times, and we did talk about it, but if you do get snagged up and you electric or paddle or whatever buck over the top of it without driving it into whatever structures down there, most times it's going to come off. You're going to get it
100%.
off.
Yeah, 100%. Those claws have got floats on them, so their claws are staying away from the current. It's just the current pushing the belly plate onto like a rock or a crack or something. It'll lift away.
All right, mate. It's been a great chat. I really enjoyed talking to you, and even myself. Like, there's a few things there. I'm definitely going to be getting some 3-pound and throwing a crab under a boat in the coming weeks. I've just got active target on my kayak, which I've just not yet to use. So I'll be looking for them and then throwing crabs at them. How good's that?
That'd be good fun.
All right, mate. Before we shoot off, mate, there's 2 more things. Is there anyone you'd like to give a shout out to? Any sponsors or anyone you want to say thank you to?
Oh yeah, mate. I always take the opportunity. Like I've been fortunate enough to have some of the best sort of back me in the industry up to this point. So massive shout out to Cranka, Lawrence, Mako Eyewear, Hot Tackle for sure, and On the Chew. Everyone sort of helped me out a lot there, and I certainly appreciate it. And then last but not least, Miller Rods, like Ian, being a brim fisher himself, and it's got a robust team behind him. It's been a great journey up to this point, and I appreciate it.
Yeah, mate, that is fantastic. All right, mate. It's been like I said, absolute pleasure having you on. But before we shoot off, mate, is there one more brim story, or a story of a fish that you remember catching? You can kind of take us back there and tell us how that went. Tell us about that experience.
Yeah, I've got plenty, mate. Like plenty of tournament fish that sort of resonate with me. But I will spin this one, and like as you know, I've just moved up to Cairns, so I'm not brim fishing for a long time. So on my way back from the Tweed, I pulled into the harbour for one sort of last fish, and funnily enough, it was with Paul Wilson, who, if you rewind back to 2008, who I started doing a lot of tournaments with. We pulled in on the old iconic Iron Cove Bridge, which is a bridge I love, and the good thing is Paul's gonna continue brim tournament fishing next year now that I've stopped, and he's had about 3 years off it. So I was just showing him the lay of the sort of land in the harbour, a couple of good spots, a couple of good pylons were given a tickle. And I was just explaining to him, I was like, mate, it's no different to how we used to do it. You just throw the crab in like this and sort of hold on. And he's like, oh, yeah. And I literally clicked the bar arm over, and I saw the slack in the line just absolutely go tink. And I was like, far out. I set the hook on it. I looked at him, and this thing was absolutely drilling me under the pylons. And I was like, good fish. And I'll keep it PG here, mate. I said a few other words there, but I got on the electric. And this thing had me so deep under the pylons, I could feel it rubbing. I was like, there's absolutely no way I'm going to get this fish out. Like, I've been in this position in so many tournaments on this pylon, and it's gone the fish's way every time. And I kid you not, I just kept whining, kept whining, and kept lecking out. And this thing zigzagged left, zigzagged right, and went around all the pylons. It came in and went side up next to the net, and it was probably 1.8, 1.9 kilo fish. He's netted it, and we've just both looked at each other, and he's just like, right, I know where I'm starting in then my first tournament next year. And I was just like, wow, what a way to go out. And that was awesome. It's something that I think will tickle me for a while I'm watching the boys out there compete on the Open this year. I'll be going. I hope someone goes to Iron Cove Bridge and gives it a bit of a lick, because there's some absolute stonking fish under there. And yeah, it was cool to get that. Got a good photo of it, and it was awesome. It was a good way to finish it. Put it all away after catching a few small fish up in Ballin there in the Tweed too. It's good to get a proper one, and one that pulls string. But the fact that it comes out in a non-tournament day and doesn't come out in a tournament day will beat me, because I don't do anything different. I just wind hard and drive the boat out. So.
Yeah. Fair enough. All right, mate. That's an incredible fish out of Sydney. Anything up over 1.8 or whatever it was is just a great fish.
So healthy.
Great story.
So healthy.
Yeah, very good. All right, mate. Thanks again for coming on, and good luck up in Cairns. I look forward to seeing some photos online.
Thanks, Stevie. I'll look forward to posting them.
Thanks, mate.
Thanks for listening. Hopefully you were informed, inspired and entertained. If you were able to learn something or just enjoyed listening, please consider subscribing and rate us on your favourite podcasting platform.